Welcome to Pre-Calculus Skill video for Skill 3. Skill 3 says, I can use and apply the distance and midpoint formulas in the Cartesian plane. And if you examine closely, you might be able to figure out the map shown below. For this skill, there are two formulas that you should know and have memorized. The distance formula, which is listed here, and the midpoint formula. The skill test for this will right off the bat ask you just to write out the formula as shown here. Or if you know your own distance and midpoint formula, feel free to share those as well. So, the distance formula. If we're given 2 points on the Cartesian plane, and for those needing a refresher, the Cartesian plane is the grid, the XY grid, with the X along the horizontal axis and the Y along the vertical axis. So if we're given some point here and some other point over here, we can find the midpoint or the distance between those 2 points. So the distance would be the length of the blue line, and the midpoint would be roughly where is that red dot located. So we can use the following formulas. Distance is equal to the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 quantity squared. This is derived from the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And if you were to compare this, you could see that the c is basically your distance, and then your a squared is the distance from one x to the other x, and the b squared is the distance from one b to the other b. You don't need to know this correlation, but some people find interest in seeing where these formulas are derived from. The next formula is the midpoint formula. And basically, to find the midpoint of 2 points, what you want to do is find the average of the 2 coordinates. So the average of the x's would be x sub 2 plus x sub 1 divided by 2. And the average of the y coordinates would be y sub 2 plus y sub 1 divided by 2. I'm going to work through 3 examples. One example finding the distance, one example finding the midpoint, and in the third example I introduced just a small twist. Overall, this should be a pretty straightforward skill. Alright, moving down the page to example 1. Given point A at 5, 9, so if we figure that out, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up 9 units, probably somewhere around there. And point B, which is located at -3, 7, so 1, 2, 3, and then 7, somewhere up along there. So we're looking at those 2 points. We want to find the distance from A to B. So what is the distance? What is the length of the black line? The first step I typically do until I get comfortable with this is I write out the distance formula as I have it memorized. And then from there, it's just a process of plugging in values. x2 is the -3, x1 is the 5, y2 is the 7, and y1 is the 9. Once I've plugged in all those values, I start calculating it out using order of operations, and I arrive at the final answer of root 68. And in this particular case, I'm asking for you to give an exact answer and an approximation. So root 68 is an exact answer, and then 8.246 is the approximation. And in my classroom, I would appreciate all approximations to be to 3 decimal places, unless I specify otherwise. In some cases, you might be able to simplify the radicand but that would be a different skill, so I'm not going to worry about that on this particular skill. Let's look at example 2. Example 2 asks us to find a midpoint, and we're given point C at 2, -5, so somewhere down here is point C, and then point D is at 3, 7, so this would be somewhere up here. And we want to know the distance, no, the midpoint from C to D. So where exactly is that red midpoint located? So like the last problem, I start by writing down my general formula until I get comfortable with this process, and then I plug in the values. X sub 2 would be the 3, X sub 1 is the 2, and we divide that all by 2, and then Y sub 2 is 7, and Y sub 1 is -5, and we divide that all by 2. This is an ordered pair, and I simplify the ordered pair to be 5/2, 1. So the location of that red dot is roughly, or actually 2.5, 1. Finally, in example 3, I combine the two processes. It says, given point E and F, find the distance from E to the midpoint, accurate to 3 decimal places. So in this case, what we have is we have point E, which is located out 6 units and then down 14 units, and point F, which is located left 3 units and up 10 units. And I want to know what is the distance not from one to the other, but from point E to the midpoint. So I'm really interested in finding out what is this distance here. And if I want to do that, I need to first find the midpoint from E to F. So first I find the midpoint by using the midpoint formula. You can see I have just plugged in the values, and if I simplify that out, I get a midpoint of 1.5, -2. And I'm asking for the distance from E to the midpoint. So my y2 is 1.5, sorry, my x2 is 1.5, and my x1 is 6. My y2 is -2, and my y1 is -14. I carry out all of the steps following order of operations, and I wind up arriving at the square root of 164.25, which if I approximate it to 3 decimal places should equal 12.816. Alright, the examples shown are pretty clear and follow more or less how it will look on the skill test. I will ask you to tell me the formulas, and then I'll have you apply the formulas in a pretty straightforward fashion like that. So, for those who are curious, this is a map of Washington, D.C. If you look closely at the map, you can find the U.S. Capitol is located here, the Washington Monument is located here, the Vietnam Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial. Alright, thank you for watching.